You ever feel like you're screaming on the inside, but on the outside, everyone just sees a wall? Like you're invisible to the people who are supposed to see you most clearly? That was me, standing in that hospital hallway, while my mother lay just beyond the door. My name is Clara, and I was there for my mother, just like I'd always been. But according to some, my being there didn't count for much, not when the real family showed up. It was late afternoon. The kind of tired, gray light that filters through hospital windows and makes everything look even more drained. Mom had taken a turn. Nothing sudden, nothing dramatic, just a turn. The kind that doctors talk about in hushed tones, using words like comfort care and prognosis. I'd been staying at the hospital, sleeping in a chair, barely leaving her side for 3 days straight. I knew her breathing patterns, the slight shifts in her color, the way her hand felt in mine. I knew her. Then they arrived. My mother's sister, Aunt Carol, and her 2 grown children, my cousins David and Brenda. They swept in like a gust of wind, all hushed urgency and performative concern. I was sitting by Mom's bed when they came in. I stood up, tired, but ready to share what I knew, what the nurses had told me, what Mom had managed to whisper earlier. Aunt Carol gave me a quick, tight smile. "Oh, Clara, you're still here." Still here? Where else would I be? This was my mother. David nodded curtly. Brenda didn't even look at me. She went straight to the bedside table, picking up a get well card and reading the name on it aloud as if confirming Mom's identity. "The doctor is coming to talk to us," Aunt Carol announced, pulling up a chair on the other side of the bed from me. "He'll explain everything." "I've been talking to the nurses," I started. "They said, 'Yes, dear, but the doctor will have the full picture,'" she interrupted, settling herself comfortably. David and Brenda flanked her, creating a sort of wall between me and the real family huddle around the bed. I felt my stomach clench. This wasn't new. This subtle and sometimes not so subtle exclusion had been a feature of my life for as long as I could remember. Family gatherings where I felt like an observer, conversations that paused when I entered the room, the way they'd talk about our family as if I were an unrelated guest. But here, now, with Mom so fragile, it felt like a physical blow. I sank back into the chair I'd practically been living in. They started talking amongst themselves, quietly at first, then louder, reminiscing about Mom's childhood, their shared relatives, holidays I'd never been part of. It was like they were curating a history that had no room for me. They discussed Mom's house, her possessions, her finances, all without a single glance in my direction, as if these were matters only for the real family to consider. I tried to interject once, asking if they'd told their kids about Mom's condition. Aunt Carol just patted my hand dismissively. "We'll handle everything, dear." Everything, meaning everything important, everything that mattered, and apparently I didn't matter in that equation. I wasn't family enough to be privy to the important discussions. Not family enough to have my days of round-the-clock care acknowledged. Not family enough to even be asked how I was doing. I was just there. The perennial outsider looking in. Sitting there, feeling smaller and smaller, feeling that familiar ache of being on the periphery of a circle I should have been at the center of. I honestly wondered how much more I could take. How do you cope when the people who share your bloodline treat you like an afterthought? When your grief and your love are deemed less valid than theirs? What would you do if your own family treated you like a stranger in your most vulnerable moment? Let me know in the comments. The doctor finally arrived, Dr. Ramirez. He was calm, kind eyes, spoke softly but clearly. Aunt Carol immediately took charge, introducing herself and her children. "We're her family," she stated, emphasis heavy on the we. Dr. Ramirez nodded, his gaze sweeping over the 3 of them, then landing on me, still in my chair by the window. He paused. Aunt Carol was already launching into questions about treatment options, prognosis, next steps. Dr. Ramirez listened patiently, but his eyes kept flicking back to me. Then he turned away from the huddle of real family. He walked over to my chair. He looked directly at me, a look of genuine inquiry and respect on his face. "And you, ma'am," he said, his voice gentle but clear enough for everyone to hear. "You've been here the longest, haven't you? Can you tell me about the last few days? What have you observed?" The room went silent. Aunt Carol, David, and Brenda all turned to stare, first at Dr. Ramirez, then at me. The word ma'am, the direct address, the acknowledgement of my presence, my duration of care, my observations. In front of them, it was like a spotlight cut through the dim room, illuminating me, making me visible for the first time all day. "Ma'am?" Aunt Carol sputtered, a look of bewildered indignation on her face. Dr. Ramirez turned back to her briefly, his expression polite but firm. "Yes, ma'am. This lady seems to have been her primary caregiver these past few days. Her input is vital." He didn't ask who I was, didn't wait for an introduction from Aunt Carol. He simply recognized the person who was there, who had been present, who had been caring. He conferred legitimacy on my role just by speaking to me with respect and asking for my knowledge. I could feel their eyes on me, sharp with surprise and something else. Resentment? Disbelief? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Dr. Ramirez was still looking at me, waiting. He wasn't waiting for Aunt Carol's permission or for her to explain who I was. He was waiting for my answer, for my observations about my mother. "Yes," I said, my voice a little shaky at first, but gaining strength as I spoke. "She's been sleeping more, not waking as much. Her breathing is shallower, and she hasn't been able to keep much liquid down since yesterday morning." I relayed the information clearly, concisely, the way the nurses had taught me to monitor her. I talked about the pain medication, the change in her color, the moments she had been lucid. I spoke about my mother, from my experience, the experience of the person who had been there day in and day out, long before the real family arrived. Dr. Ramirez listened intently, nodding occasionally. He asked me follow-up questions, treating my answers with the same weight and importance he would give any family member, any caregiver. He didn't minimize my role or defer to Aunt Carol. He spoke to me. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Aunt Carol was practically vibrating with suppressed fury. David and Brenda looked stunned, then annoyed. They had come here expecting to take control, to be the central figures, the ones making the decisions, the ones receiving the doctor's sole attention. And here I was, the one they had tried to erase, being treated as the most important person in the room by the very authority figure they had come to consult. It was a small moment in the grand scheme of things, a few words exchanged in a sterile hospital room. But for me, it was everything. It was validation. It was being seen. It was a quiet, unexpected defiance of the narrative my family had tried to impose on me my entire life. It was the moment someone outside their circle recognized that my connection to my mother was real, valid, and important, regardless of what anyone else said. It was just the beginning of navigating this final chapter with Mom, with the added layer of family dynamics I had always dreaded. What came next was even more complicated, even more painful, and ultimately, even more revealing about who was truly family and who wasn't. The doctor's words hung in the air after he left, a protective shield around me in that moment. But the silence that followed was thick with unspoken accusations. Aunt Carol didn't say anything directly about Ma'am, but her eyes, fixed on me, could have drilled holes through steel. David and Brenda just shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence completely deflated. It was clear they weren't used to being second-guessed, especially not by someone they considered irrelevant. We left the room, and the tension followed us into the hallway, a physical weight pressing down. Aunt Carol pulled David and Brenda aside a few feet away, their heads close together, voices low and urgent. I couldn't hear everything, but snippets like unnecessary interference and control the narrative drifted my way. It was obvious they were strategizing, regrouping after their initial plan had been so unexpectedly disrupted. I stood there for a moment, feeling exposed, but also oddly resolute. I wasn't going anywhere. This wasn't about winning some family power struggle. It was about being there for my mother, ensuring her needs and wishes were met during this incredibly vulnerable time. The immediate aftermath of that meeting was a flurry of phone calls and passive aggression. Suddenly, Aunt Carol was the self-appointed family spokesperson, relaying information about Mom's condition and care options, always subtly minimizing my involvement or outright excluding me from conversations. "I just spoke to the nurse," she'd say to David, loud enough for me to hear. "She thinks Mom needs round-the-clock care now. I'll handle getting the estimates for the agencies." Never a "we should discuss this" or "what do you think?" It was always "I'll handle it" or "I've decided." David and Brenda followed her lead, echoing her sentiments or forwarding emails about potential care facilities that had clearly been sent only to them. They were trying to create a parallel information stream, one where I didn't exist. They started showing up at the hospital more frequently, often when they knew I'd be there. Not to sit with Mom, usually, but to corner nurses, ask pointed questions about Mom's visitor's log, or make comments within Mom's earshot about how confusing things must be for her, implying that maybe too many people were involved. It was exhausting, this constant low-level warfare. Every interaction felt like a test, a subtle push to see if I'd back down, if I'd get frustrated enough to just walk away. But I couldn't. Mom needed me. Even in her weakened state, she seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. Sometimes, when they were there, she'd squeeze my hand tighter, or her eyes would follow me across the room, a silent plea to stay. Those moments were my fuel. The biggest battleground quickly became Mom's house and her finances. Aunt Carol insisted that decisions needed to be made about the house, selling it, renting it, something, immediately, to cover mounting medical costs. She claimed Mom had given her power of attorney years ago, a document I had never seen and that Mom had never mentioned. When I asked about it gently, Mom just seemed confused. "Power of attorney? What are you talking about, dear? I don't remember signing anything like that." This sent Aunt Carol into a frenzy. "Of course she doesn't remember," she snapped at me over the phone later that day. "That's the dementia. It's exactly why I need to handle things. She's not competent." I knew Mom wasn't herself, but she still had moments of clarity, moments where she knew who she was talking to and could express simple preferences. The idea that she had secretly given Aunt Carol control over everything seemed completely out of character. Mom was private about her finances, but she trusted me. We had talked, vaguely, about her wishes for the future, about wanting to stay in her home as long as possible. Aunt Carol's urgency felt wrong, predatory even. I decided I needed to see this document. I asked Aunt Carol for a copy. She refused, saying it wasn't any of my business and that I wasn't authorized. Authorized by whom? Her? This escalated things significantly. I consulted a lawyer just for advice. I explained the situation, my relationship with my mother, the family dynamics, the sudden claim of power of attorney. The lawyer listened patiently and explained my rights and options. He confirmed that without seeing the document, there was no way to verify its authenticity or scope. He suggested sending a formal request for the document and, if necessary, petitioning the court for guardianship or conservatorship if it became clear Mom was being exploited or if her existing plans weren't being followed. That felt drastic, like something out of a movie. But the lawyer said it was sometimes necessary to protect vulnerable individuals. I sent a registered letter to Aunt Carol, requesting a copy of the power of attorney within 10 business days. The silence that followed was deafening. 10 days came and went. No document, no response. Instead, I started getting calls from David and Brenda, not about the letter, but asking bizarre questions about Mom's jewelry and where she kept her important papers. It was thinly veiled snooping, clearly prompted by Aunt Carol. They were circling, looking for assets, looking for leverage. It was disgusting. It felt like they were already dividing up the spoils, and Mom was still very much alive, still needing care and comfort, not vultures picking over her belongings. The stress of it all was immense. Trying to be present for Mom, navigating the complexities of her medical care, and simultaneously fending off my family's maneuvers was taking a toll. There were days I felt completely overwhelmed, questioning if I was doing the right thing, if I was strong enough to keep fighting them. They had a lifetime of history, shared memories, and the power of the family name behind them. I just had my relationship with my mother, a bond they had always tried to diminish. But that bond felt stronger than ever now. It was the anchor holding me steady in the storm they were creating. I remembered the doctor calling me ma'am, the respect in his voice, the recognition that I was Mom's primary caregiver, her closest advocate. That memory was another anchor. It reminded me that my role wasn't something they could grant or take away, it just was. And I wasn't going to let them erase it. The fight for Mom's dignity, and for my place by her side, was far from over. It was just entering its most intense phase. The fight, as I said, was just entering its most intense phase. It wasn't just about being there for Mom anymore. It was about actively defending my right to be there, to make decisions, to be recognized as her family. My aunts and uncles, emboldened by their perceived position and history, started escalating their tactics. They wouldn't just call and ask questions, they'd show up, unannounced, at the hospital, even during visiting hours that were supposed to be restricted. I remember one afternoon clearly. Mom was resting, finally comfortable after a difficult morning. I was sitting by her bedside, reading to her softly, just being present. The door opened, and in walked my Aunt Carol and Uncle Bill. Their faces were stiff, not with concern for Mom, but with a kind of cold determination. They barely glanced at Mom before turning their attention to me. "We need to talk," Aunt Carol said, her voice low but sharp. "Mom's resting right now," I replied, keeping my voice gentle so as not to disturb her. "Can we talk later?" "No, it needs to be now," Uncle Bill insisted, stepping further into the room. "We've been trying to reach the doctor, but they say they can only talk to next of kin." He gave me a pointed look. My blood ran cold. They were trying to go around me. "I am next of kin," I said, my voice gaining a little firmness despite my effort to stay calm. "I have medical power of attorney." Aunt Carol scoffed. "Power of attorney can be contested. We are her actual family, her sister and brother-in-law. We have her best interests at heart." "So do I said, standing up slowly. I moved between them and Mom's bed, a protective barrier. "And the doctor talks to me because I'm the one here, day in and day out, managing her care. I'm the one he sees as her primary contact." "But you're not her daughter," Uncle Bill said, hitting the core of their argument, the thing they always came back to. That I wasn't born into this family in the way they were. That my connection, in their eyes, was secondary, less legitimate. "No, I'm not," I agreed, my voice steady. "But I am her child. And I'm the one she chose to give medical power of attorney to. That means something legally, and it means everything emotionally." They didn't back down. They started asking aggressive questions about Mom's treatment plan, questioning the doctor's decisions, questioning my decisions. They acted like they had a right to know everything, to weigh in on everything, even though they weren't the ones sitting through difficult conversations with doctors, weren't the ones coordinating medications, weren't the ones holding Mom's hand when she was scared. It felt like an interrogation, in Mom's sick room. It was surreal and deeply upsetting. I had to remind myself that my priority was Mom's peace and well-being, not winning an argument with them. I kept my answers brief, factual, and focused on what the medical team was recommending. I refused to get drawn into their emotional attacks or their attempts to undermine me. "Look," I finally said, feeling exhausted. "I'm happy to share information, but this isn't the time or the place. Mom needs her rest. I can talk to you outside, or we can schedule a call with the doctor, but you need to respect that she's here, and she's fragile." They huffed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't caving. Aunt Carol gave me a look that could curdle milk. "We'll be talking to the hospital administration," she threatened. "We have concerns about the quality of care." That was a low blow. The nurses and doctors had been incredible. They were working tirelessly, showing Mom genuine compassion. This wasn't about Mom's care. It was about them trying to find leverage, any way they could to assert control and discredit me. "You do what you need to do," I said, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. But my focus is on Mom and following the doctor's orders. They left eventually, leaving a tense, heavy silence in the room. Mom, thankfully, seemed to have slept through most of it, or perhaps she was just pretending to for my sake. I sat back down, my heart pounding, my hands shaking slightly. That incident solidified something for me. They weren't just passive-aggressive or dismissive anymore. They were actively trying to interfere, to disrupt, to take control. Their attempts weren't limited to the hospital. They started calling Mom's house phone, even though I had explained that I was staying there to manage things and she wasn't home. They'd leave messages, sometimes seemingly innocent, sometimes laced with veiled questions about her finances or possessions. They even tried contacting her neighbors, fishing for information. It was a constant barrage, a chipping away at my peace of mind. Every phone call from an unknown number, every unexpected knock on the door sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I felt like I was living under siege, and the emotional toll was immense. I was grieving the changes in my mother, worrying about her future, navigating complex medical decisions, and fighting a legal and emotional battle with her family. There were days I'd just cry from sheer exhaustion and frustration. Was this ever going to end? Was I strong enough to keep this up indefinitely? But then I'd look at Mom, see her vulnerability, her reliance on me, and my resolve would harden again. She needed me. She had chosen me to be her advocate, her protector in this final chapter of her life. I couldn't let her down. I couldn't let them win. Winning, in their eyes, meant pushing me out, erasing my role, and potentially gaining control over her affairs. Winning for me meant ensuring Mom was cared for with dignity, respect, and love, according to her wishes, with me firmly by her side. The memory of the doctor calling me ma'am, the way he looked at me, not as some outsider but as the person in charge, the person who mattered in this situation, became a powerful internal shield. It was a reminder that my legitimacy didn't come from their approval, but from my mother's trust and my unwavering presence. I knew they were probably talking about me behind my back, spinning narratives that painted me as an opportunist, someone who had suddenly appeared to take advantage of a sick old woman. It hurt, deeply, to think that people I had known my whole life, people who were supposed to be family, could be so cruel and calculating. But I couldn't let their gossip or their lies distract me. My focus had to remain on Mom and the immediate challenges of her care. The hospital staff, bless them, continued to be amazing. They recognized me, they knew I was the primary contact, and they continued to treat me with respect. I think they saw what was happening, the family dynamics at play. They became unintentional allies, subtly reinforcing my role by always deferring to me, always including me in conversations, always asking for my permission or input before discussing anything with other family members. That simple act of recognition, day after day, was incredibly validating and helped counteract the constant invalidation I was facing from my aunts and uncles. It was a quiet, powerful form of support in a very lonely fight. The fight was far from over, but I was finding strength in unexpected places, and my determination was only growing stronger. The days blurred together, a cycle of hospital rooms, hushed conversations with nurses, and the constant, gnawing anxiety about Mom. I was living on adrenaline and microwaved meals from the hospital cafeteria. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when there were charts to review, medications to track, and a mother who needed me present, even if she wasn't fully lucid all the time. My aunts and uncles continued their campaign of subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, undermining. They'd show up, often unannounced, and hover in the hallway, casting disapproving glances. They'd ask nurses questions they'd already answered for me, trying to find inconsistencies, trying to catch me out. "Is she really the primary contact?" I overheard one aunt whisper to a nurse one afternoon. The nurse, bless her heart, just smiled politely and said, "Yes, Mrs. Smith is the designated point person for all medical decisions." It was a small moment, but it felt like a shield. They started leaving notes, passive-aggressive little slips of paper on the bedside table. Make sure Mom gets her water at exactly 2 p.m. Did you remember to fluff her pillow? It looks flat. Things I was already doing, things the nurses were already doing. It wasn't about Mom's comfort. It was about asserting their presence, about implying that I wasn't doing enough, wasn't competent. I'd collect them, read them, feel the familiar stab of hurt and anger, and then discard them. I wouldn't engage. Engaging meant giving their negativity power, and I needed all my energy for Mom. The doctors started talking about next steps. Mom wasn't improving as quickly as they'd hoped. The conversation shifted from immediate crisis management to long-term care, rehabilitation, possibly a skilled nursing facility depending on her recovery. This was uncharted territory for me. Up until this point, my focus had been minute-to-minute survival, getting through the day. Now I had to think weeks, months ahead. It was overwhelming, and predictably, the family saw this as another opportunity. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about where Mom should go, who should be involved, how her finances should be handled. Finances. That was the real core of it, wasn't it? Mom had always been independent, handled her own affairs. I knew she had savings, a small pension, enough to live comfortably, but not a fortune. But to my aunts and uncles, it represented something to be controlled, something they felt entitled to have a say in. Never mind that I was the one spending every waking hour at the hospital, researching facilities, talking to social workers, trying to understand the complex world of elder care. They were calculating, positioning themselves. They started suggesting alternative care plans, plans that conveniently minimized my role. Maybe she should come stay with me for a while, one aunt offered, despite living 3 states away and having never offered Mom a place to stay before. We should probably get power of attorney squared away, an uncle mused loudly in the waiting room, looking directly at me. Someone needs to be able to manage her money if she's not able to. They acted as if this was a neutral suggestion, a practical step, but the implication was clear, that someone should not be me. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. They weren't just trying to sideline me, they were trying to take control of Mom's life, and potentially, her resources. I knew instinctively that Mom would never want that. She trusted me. She had always trusted me. But how could I prove that? How could I fight against their combined pressure, their shared history, their narrative that I was the outsider, the interloper? The social worker assigned to Mom's case became another quiet ally. I confided in her about the family dynamics, the pressure I was under. She listened patiently, her expression understanding. It's not uncommon, unfortunately, she said softly, especially when there are difficult decisions to be made and assets involved. She gave me practical advice. Document everything, keep records of my time and expenses, and most importantly, make sure Mom's wishes, if she was able to express them, were paramount. She also advised me to speak directly with Mom's doctors about the family situation so they were aware. I took her advice. I started a detailed journal, noting down every visit, every conversation, every decision made. It felt slightly paranoid, but necessary. I also made a point of pulling Mom's primary doctor aside one morning. Dr. Evans was a kind, no-nonsense woman who had been incredibly supportive. I explained the situation, the family's skepticism, their attempts to question my authority and spread rumors. I told her how important it was to me that Mom's care plan reflected her best interests and that I was the one Mom had always relied on. Dr. Evans listened intently, nodding. When I finished, she just looked at me, her eyes steady. "Mrs. Smith," she said, using my married name, a small detail that somehow felt significant in that moment. "Your mother's care is our priority, and you are her designated representative. We will continue to communicate directly with you regarding her treatment plan and any decisions that need to be made." It was a simple statement, but it felt like a lifeline. It was a professional validation of my role, a quiet reassurance that the medical team saw me, recognized me, and would stand by me. It didn't stop the family's machinations, but it gave me strength knowing I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. The hospital staff, From the nurses to the doctors to the social worker were becoming my unexpected support system, a buffer against the storm brewing outside the sterile walls of Mom's room. The storm, I knew, was far from over. It was just gathering strength. That validation from Dr. Evans, it felt like a small victory, a tiny bit of solid ground in quicksand. But it didn't slow them down, not one bit. If anything, it just seemed to make them angrier, more determined. My sister, bless her heart, immediately called my brother, and then the cousins, spreading her version of events. Suddenly, my phone was blowing up. Texts filled with accusations, veiled threats, guilt trips. How could you cut us out? Mom would never want this. You're keeping us from her. It was relentless. They twisted everything. The hospital saying they'd talk to me directly became me banning the family. My insistence on following Mom's previously expressed wishes became me playing God. It was exhausting. Trying to focus on Mom, on her needs, on understanding the medical jargon while constantly having to fend off these attacks. I felt like I was living in two different worlds simultaneously. One world was quiet, sterile, filled with beeping machines and hushed conversations with nurses about vital signs and medication schedules. The other world was loud, chaotic, filled with shouting matches on the phone and the constant hum of anxiety in my chest. My sister even started showing up at the hospital at odd hours, trying to catch the nurses off guard, asking them questions about Mom's condition that they were instructed to direct to me. She'd try to slip into Mom's room when I wasn't there, sometimes just to sit there, sometimes to try and talk to Mom, even though Mom wasn't really lucid enough for meaningful conversation. It felt like trespassing, like she was trying to stake a claim on Mom's unconscious body. One of the nurses, a lovely woman named Brenda, pulled me aside one day. "Honey," she said softly, "your sister was here again. She was asking a lot of questions. Just wanted to let you know we stuck to the protocol. Told her any updates go through you." It was another small act of kindness, another reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this fight, but it also highlighted the constant vigilance required. It wasn't just about Mom's health. It was about protecting my role, protecting Mom's wishes from being trampled by family drama. The emotional toll was immense. There were days I'd sit in the waiting room, or even just in my car in the hospital parking lot, and just cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet, weary tears. Tears of frustration, of sadness for my mom, and honestly, tears of grief for the family I thought I had. The family that was supposed to rally together, not turn on each other. It felt like a betrayal on multiple levels. I tried reasoning with them at first. I tried explaining again, calmly, rationally, why certain decisions were being made, why Mom's care plan was the way it was, based on her doctor's recommendations and her own past statements. It was like talking to a brick wall. They had their narrative, and nothing I said could penetrate it. They were convinced I had some ulterior motive, that I was after Mom's money, which, let me tell you, there wasn't some hidden fortune waiting to be claimed, or that I was just being difficult for the sake of control. It was baffling and hurtful. How do you even begin to have a conversation with people who are so determined to misunderstand you? People you've known your whole life, who you shared childhoods with, who are supposed to be your closest allies. It reached a point where I dreaded answering my phone. Every incoming call or text felt like another potential battle. I started filtering calls, letting some go to voicemail just to buy myself a few moments of peace. But then the guilt would creep in. Was I doing the right thing by disengaging? Shouldn't I keep trying to make them understand? But what if trying just gave them more ammunition? What do you do when the people who are supposed to be your family are actively working against you, making an already impossible situation even harder? It's a question that kept me up at night. The stress started affecting my own health. I wasn't sleeping well, I was barely eating, and I felt this constant knot of anxiety in my stomach. My husband was incredibly supportive, bless him, listening patiently to my rants and trying to offer comfort, but he wasn't dealing with the direct onslaught. He saw the effects, but he wasn't in the trenches with the text messages and the phone calls. Around this time, Mom's condition stabilized slightly, but it became clear that she wasn't going to make a miraculous recovery and come home tomorrow. The doctors started talking about long-term care options, about rehabilitation versus skilled nursing facilities. This opened up a whole new can of worms with the family. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion on where Mom should go, who should pay for it, and who should be in charge of visiting and managing things. Their concern, which had manifested as attacks on me, now shifted slightly to debates about Mom's future living situation, still using it as a way to challenge my authority. My sister insisted Mom should come live with her, despite her house not being set up for someone with Mom's needs and her own demanding job. My brother thought we should just figure something out without involving professionals, which was completely unrealistic. I had to sit through meetings with social workers and facility representatives, trying to absorb complex information about insurance coverage and levels of care, all while anticipating the inevitable backlash from my family. Every option I explored, every facility I considered, was met with criticism and suspicion from them. Why that one? Is it the cheapest? Are you just trying to get rid of her? It was relentless. It felt like I was walking a tightrope, with Mom's well-being on one side and my family's disapproval on the other, and every step was scrutinized and judged. It was hard not to feel completely overwhelmed, like I was failing everyone, even though I knew deep down I was doing everything I could to advocate for Mom based on her needs and what she would have wanted. This fight wasn't just about Mom's care anymore. It had morphed into a battle for control, a power struggle dressed up as concern. And I was caught right in the middle of it, trying to hold on to my sanity and do the right thing. Trying to find a place for Mom felt like navigating a maze where the walls kept shifting. Every time I thought I had found a potential option, something would go wrong. Either the facility didn't have the right level of care for her specific needs, or the cost was astronomical and insurance wouldn't cover enough, or it was in a location that my family deemed unacceptable for some reason. "It's too far," my sister would say, even though it was only 20 minutes away. "It looks depressing," my brother would comment after seeing a single photo online. They weren't offering solutions, just roadblocks. It was exhausting, absolutely soul-crushing. I remember one particularly bad week. I had found this small, highly rated memory care unit that seemed perfect. It was clean. The staff seemed genuinely caring when I visited, and they had programs tailored for people with Mom's stage of Alzheimer's. It wasn't cheap, but it was within the realm of possibility with her savings and what insurance might cover after a lot of paperwork and appeals. I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. I scheduled a meeting for my siblings to see it with me, hoping that seeing it in person, meeting the staff, might change their perspective. It was a disaster. From the moment we walked in, they were critical. My sister complained about the paint color. My brother asked intrusive questions about the staff's qualifications in a way that felt less like concern and more like an interrogation. They barely looked at the residents, who seemed happy and engaged in an activity. They didn't ask about the care plans or the medical support available. They just found fault with everything they could. Afterward, in the parking lot, the argument erupted. "You seriously think this is a good place for Mom?" my sister demanded, her voice sharp. "It smells like old people," my brother added, which was a cruel and completely untrue thing to say. I tried to explain the benefits, the specialized care, the activities, but they weren't listening. They had already decided they didn't like it because I had found it. The worst part was the implication that I was trying to dump Mom somewhere to get her out of my hair, that I didn't care enough to find the perfect place, which, in their eyes, seemed to be some mythical facility that didn't exist, or perhaps just keeping her at home indefinitely. A task they weren't willing to take on themselves, but expected me to facilitate somehow. My sister said, "Maybe if you spent less time looking at these places and more time figuring out how to care for her properly at home, this wouldn't be necessary." That stung. It really, really stung. I was already doing everything I could, sacrificing my time, my energy, my own life, and they were acting like I was being lazy or neglectful. Meanwhile, Mom's condition wasn't waiting for us to figure things out. She was declining more rapidly. The moments of lucidity were becoming fewer and farther between. She was having more trouble with simple tasks, getting dressed, eating, finding her way around her own house. The doctor visits became more frequent. Her primary care physician, Dr. Ramirez, was a kind, no-nonsense woman who had been Mom's doctor for years. She understood the situation, both Mom's medical needs and the difficulty of providing round-the-clock care at home. She had been gently suggesting for a while that we needed to consider more structured care, maybe not a nursing home yet, but assisted living with a strong memory care component or a dedicated memory care facility. Trying to convey this to my family was another battle. They didn't want to hear it. They would dismiss the doctor's opinions, saying she was just trying to push us into something expensive or that she didn't really know Mom like they did. It was maddening. They were so resistant to facing the reality of Mom's illness and what it meant for her future and our ability to care for her safely. They were clinging to a past version of Mom that no longer existed, and in doing so, they were making it impossible to care for the Mom who was here now, the one who needed specialized help. The stress was immense. I wasn't sleeping. I was constantly on edge, anticipating the next critical phone call or email from my siblings. My job was suffering because my focus was constantly divided. I felt this crushing weight of responsibility, not just for Mom, but for navigating this impossible family dynamic. Every decision felt like a potential landmine. I started to doubt myself constantly. Was I being selfish? Was I giving up too easily? Was there something else I should be doing? Their constant questioning and criticism were chipping away at my confidence, even though I knew, logically, that I was acting in Mom's best interest, based on the advice of professionals and the reality of her illness. Dr. Ramirez saw the toll it was taking on me. During one appointment, after she had examined Mom and talked with her for a bit, she pulled me aside. "How are you doing?" she asked, looking at me with genuine concern in her eyes. I just broke down. I told her about the fighting, the criticism, how impossible it felt to get my siblings to agree on anything or to accept the reality of Mom's needs. I told her how isolated I felt, how their lack of support and worse, their active opposition, was making everything so much harder. She listened patiently, nodding. She told me that she had seen this before, many times. That family dynamics around aging parents and difficult illnesses could be incredibly complex and painful. She validated my feelings, which was something I hadn't gotten from my own family in months. She said I was doing an incredible job advocating for my mother under very difficult circumstances. She reinforced that Mom needed more care than could realistically be provided at home by one person, or even with part-time help. She said that finding a specialized facility wasn't giving up. It was providing the appropriate level of care and ensuring Mom's safety and well-being. It was like a lifeline. Hearing a professional, someone who knew Mom's medical history and understood the progression of her disease, tell me I was doing the right thing was exactly what I needed. It gave me a little bit of strength back, enough to keep going, to keep searching, to keep pushing back against the negativity. Dr. Ramirez suggested that it might be helpful if she spoke with my siblings directly, explained Mom's condition and needs from a medical perspective, and emphasized why specialized care was necessary. I hesitated, knowing how resistant they were, but I was desperate. Maybe hearing it from a doctor, a neutral third party, would make a difference. I agreed. We scheduled a call with Dr. Ramirez and my siblings for the following week. I had a bad feeling about it, but I also felt like I had to try everything. This was reaching a breaking point, and something had to give. Okay. So the call with Dr. Ramirez and my siblings was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. I spent the weekend dreading it. It felt like stepping into a cage match, and I was bringing the referee, hoping they'd listen. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. Maybe, just maybe, hearing a medical professional explain the reality of Mom's condition, the constant supervision required, the risks of falls or wandering, the progressive nature of the dementia, maybe that would finally sink in. Tuesday rolled around. And I was a nervous wreck. I set up the conference call, sent out the dial-in details. My brother Mark joined first, right on time, which surprised me. He was usually the last one to show up for anything. Then Sarah joined, a few minutes late, naturally. Dr. Ramirez joined right on the dot. After brief introductions, I explained why we were all on the call, that Dr. Ramirez, Mom's neurologist, wanted to discuss Mom's current condition and the best path forward for her care. I tried to keep my voice neutral, just stating the facts. Dr. Ramirez took over. She spoke calmly, professionally. She started by giving a brief overview of Mom's diagnosis and how the disease had progressed over the past few years, noting the increasing frequency of disorientation, memory loss, and difficulty with daily tasks. She explained the specific challenges of late-stage dementia, emphasizing the need for constant supervision, assistance with personal care, and a safe environment. She talked about the risks, falls, malnutrition, wandering, infections, and how challenging it was for a single caregiver, even with help, to mitigate all those risks in a home setting. She then gently but firmly stated her medical recommendation, that Mom would benefit significantly from specialized memory care. She explained that these facilities were designed to provide the specific level of care, safety, and structured environment that someone at Mom's stage of dementia required. She wasn't pushy, just factual, explaining the medical necessity from her professional perspective. And then, the siblings weighed in. Mark was the first. He immediately jumped on the "but she's happier at home" train. He talked about familiar surroundings, about how Mom recognized the house, her room. He minimized the incidents I'd told them about. The getting lost in the house, the forgetting she'd eaten, the agitation. He framed it as just Mom being Mom sometimes, getting a little confused. He completely ignored the doctor's medical assessment. Sarah was worse. She didn't even address the medical stuff. She went straight to the family argument. "But we're her family," she said, her voice dripping with accusation. "Family takes care of family. We promised we'd never put her in a home." She brought up Mom's supposed fear of nursing homes from years ago, twisting it into some kind of unbreakable vow we'd all made. She implied that wanting specialized care was a betrayal of that promise, a sign that I didn't care enough. It was the same tired argument, but hearing it in front of Dr. Ramirez felt particularly frustrating. They weren't hearing the doctor. They were just digging their heels in deeper. Dr. Ramirez listened patiently. She didn't interrupt. When they finished, she calmly reiterated her points. She acknowledged their feelings about keeping Mom home, about the idea of family care. But she gently countered their arguments with medical facts. She explained that while familiar surroundings were important, safety and appropriate care were paramount. She explained that family care was wonderful in theory, but the reality of advanced dementia often required a level of professional expertise and constant staffing that was simply not feasible in a private home, regardless of how much the family loved the person. She reframed the idea of specialized care not as putting Mom away, but as providing her with the best possible quality of life and safety, given her medical condition. She specifically addressed Sarah's family promise argument. She said something I'll never forget. She said, "Caring for a loved one with advanced dementia is one of the most challenging things a family can face. Sometimes, the most loving act, the greatest expression of care, is recognizing when professional, specialized support is needed to ensure their safety, dignity, and well-being. This isn't about love. It's about providing the appropriate medical and environmental care that Ms. Mom's last name now requires." She used Mom's last name, not Mom. It was a small thing, but it highlighted that she was speaking as a medical professional about a patient, not getting drawn into the family drama. Despite Dr. Ramirez's clear explanation, the siblings remained unconvinced. Mark kept going back to, "She's fine at home." Sarah kept repeating the "family takes care of family" mantra. They didn't ask insightful questions about Mom's condition or the care facilities. They just repeated their objections. It was like they had their fingers in their ears, humming loudly so they couldn't hear the doctor. Towards the end of the call, Dr. Ramirez made one more attempt. She said, "I understand this is a difficult decision. My recommendation is based purely on Ms. Mom's last name's medical needs and ensuring her safety and quality of life. I strongly urge you to consider touring some facilities, seeing the level of care provided. It might help alleviate some of your concerns." Mark mumbled something about it being too expensive. Sarah just sighed dramatically. It was clear they weren't going to budge. The call ended with a polite but firm restatement from Dr. Ramirez about her medical opinion and a general sense of unresolved tension hanging in the air. After the call, I was exhausted and frustrated beyond belief. It hadn't worked. Hearing it from a doctor hadn't changed their minds. They were so fixated on their idea of what should happen, on their fear or guilt or whatever it was, that they couldn't see the reality of Mom's situation or listen to professional advice. It felt like another dead end, another wall I'd hit. But Dr. Ramirez calling had still helped me. It reinforced that I wasn't crazy, that my assessment of Mom's needs wasn't just me being overwhelmed or selfish. It was a medical necessity. And that gave me a little more resolve. Okay, they wouldn't listen to the doctor. Fine, I couldn't force them to agree. But I also couldn't let Mom stay in a situation that was becoming increasingly unsafe, risking her health and my own well-being. The call solidified something for me. Their resistance wasn't going to stop the inevitable. It just made it harder. It meant I had to keep pushing forward, even if I was doing it alone. I had to find a place for Mom, a good place, and figure out how to make it happen, regardless of their objections. The fight wasn't over. It had just entered a new, even more difficult phase. Now it wasn't just about convincing them. It was about navigating the practicalities of moving Mom while dealing with their active disapproval. Okay, so the doctor's call solidified it. Their resistance wasn't going to magically vanish, and it certainly wasn't going to make Mom's situation any less critical. It just meant I had to pivot. The goal wasn't convincing them anymore. The goal was finding Mom a safe place and getting her there. It was a heavy realization, accepting that I was essentially going to have to do this alone, maneuvering around their opposition rather than working with their support. The next few weeks were a blur of phone calls, online searches, and tours. Assisted living facilities, memory care units. I learned more acronyms and care levels than I ever wanted to know. It was overwhelming. Each place had its own feel, its own policies, its own price tag. And let me tell you, the price tags were astronomical. This wasn't something I had planned for, not financially or emotionally. I was balancing this massive undertaking with my own job, my own life, which suddenly felt very small and secondary. I visited places that felt cold and institutional, places that felt warm, but maybe not equipped for Mom's specific needs, places that were beautiful but completely out of reach financially. I asked questions about staffing ratios, memory care programs, safety measures, how they handled difficult behaviors, what the food was like, if they had outdoor space, if they allowed pets. Mom had a cat, though I knew realistically the cat probably couldn't go with her, which was another heartbreak waiting to happen. It was like buying a car, but the stakes were infinitely higher and the product was someone's quality of life and dignity. All this time, the communication with the family was strained, at best. I'd send updates, like, "I'm looking at facilities," or "I toured a place today," trying to keep them in the loop, hoping maybe seeing me take concrete steps would soften their stance, or at least prompt them to offer some help. Any help. But mostly, I got silence, or short, clipped responses that didn't engage with the substance of what I was saying. It was like they were deliberately ignoring the reality I was facing, perhaps hoping if they didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't happen. There were a few times they pushed back. "Are you sure this is necessary?" they'd ask, despite the doctor's explicit recommendation and the undeniable evidence in Mom's declining condition. Or, "Maybe we should just wait and see." Wait for what? For her to fall and break something? For her to wander off? The waiting game felt incredibly irresponsible, even cruel, given what I was witnessing daily. Their continued resistance, even passive, felt like another layer of burden. Not only was I doing the practical work, but I was also carrying the emotional weight of their disapproval and lack of support. It was incredibly lonely. Finding a place wasn't just about the care. It was about finding a place that felt like it could be a home. Not her old home. Nothing could replace that. But a place where she could feel safe, comfortable, and treated with respect. I finally found a small memory care unit that felt right. It was smaller than some of the big corporate places, felt more personal. The staff seemed genuinely caring. They had a lovely enclosed garden area, and their approach to memory care felt thoughtful and person-centered. It wasn't perfect, nothing is, but it felt like the best option I could realistically manage. Then came the next hurdle. The finances and the paperwork. Good heavens, the paperwork. Applications, medical history forms, financial disclosures, power of attorney documents. Thank goodness I had gotten those sorted out earlier, despite the family's initial grumbling. It was a mountain of bureaucracy. And the cost. It was going to be a stretch. I had to figure out how to make it work, looking into her savings, potential aid programs, and what I could personally contribute. It was stressful, adding a significant financial worry to the already overflowing plate of emotional and practical stress. I had to have the difficult conversation with Mom, too, explaining that she wouldn't be living in her house anymore. It was heartbreaking. She loved her home. It was filled with decades of memories. Trying to explain why felt impossible. She would get confused, scared, sometimes angry. "But why?" she'd ask, her eyes wide with confusion. "I'm fine here." Seeing her distress, knowing I was the one causing it, even though I believed it was for her own good, was agonizing. It made me doubt myself sometimes, despite all the evidence and professional advice. Was I doing the right thing? Was there another way? But then I'd see her struggle with something simple, or find something she'd misplaced in a dangerous spot, and the resolve would harden again. Then there was the task of going through her things. Decades of accumulated life. Photos, letters, furniture, clothes she hadn't worn in years, mementos. It was an emotional archaeology project, deciding what to keep, what to give away, what to pack for her new, much smaller space. It felt like I was dismantling her life, piece by piece. Each object held a memory, and letting go of them felt like letting go of a part of her, a part of us. I tried to involve the family, asked if they wanted to go through things, if they wanted any specific items. Again, mostly silence or vague, non-committal answers. It reinforced the feeling that I was bearing this burden alone. They were her children, her nieces and nephews, but they weren't stepping up for this incredibly difficult personal task. It was just me, sifting through the remnants of a life, trying to decide what pieces could fit into the next chapter. As the move date approached, the tension escalated. Not just the stress of the move itself, but the unspoken tension with the family. They knew it was happening now. They weren't offering to help pack, to help with the move, to even come say goodbye to the house. It was a stark, painful silence where support should have been. It felt like they were punishing me for moving forward, for doing what needed to be done, even if they couldn't bring themselves to agree with it. It was a lonely, heavy time, filled with packing tape, boxes, and the quiet hum of anxiety. The house felt both too full of memories and too empty of support. The house felt both too full of memories and too empty of support. The moving truck was scheduled, the boxes were stacked, labeled, and looming. Every room was a reminder of a different time, a different version of my mom, a different version of me growing up here. It wasn't just furniture and objects, it was history packed into cardboard. The family remained distant. Not a single offer to help lift a box, to drive a load, to even just sit with Mom and keep her company while I wrestled with the physical and emotional labor of dismantling her life. It was deafening, that silence. It spoke volumes about where I stood, or where they thought I stood, in the grand scheme of things. I was the one doing the work, making the hard calls, bearing the weight, and they were spectators, or perhaps even critics from afar. Moving day arrived, a blur of physical exertion and emotional exhaustion. The movers were efficient, professional, blessedly neutral in the face of the palpable tension that wasn't outwardly visible, but was definitely there, humming beneath the surface. I directed them, made sure the right boxes went to the right place, double-checked everything. My mom was mostly quiet that day. I tried to explain what was happening, that we were going on an adventure, to a new place that would be good for her. She nodded sometimes just looked around with wide, unseeing eyes. It was hard to know how much she truly understood, but I talked to her anyway, constantly, keeping a running commentary on what was happening, trying to make it less frightening, less disorienting. Getting her ready was another challenge. She was frail, confused. It wasn't just about getting her dressed. It was about navigating her disorientation, her fear of the unknown. I packed a small bag for her, familiar things, a favorite sweater, a worn photograph. Things I hoped would offer a sliver of comfort in the overwhelming newness. The car ride itself felt long, even though it wasn't an enormous distance. The weight of everything pressed down on me. The responsibility for her, for the move, for the outcome, it was all on my shoulders. There was no one to share the driving with, no one to chat with to pass the time, no one to just be there. It was just me and Mom, heading towards this new chapter, leaving the old one behind, piece by agonizing piece. Arriving at the new facility was another wave of emotions. It was clean, bright, seemed well-staffed, but it wasn't home. Not our home, the one filled with decades of memories. It was a place designed for care, for safety, for managing needs I could no longer meet alone. Getting Mom settled in her new room was a delicate dance. Trying to make it feel familiar with the few things I had brought from the house. A favorite chair, some pictures on the wall, a familiar blanket. I unpacked her clothes, put her toiletries away, tried to create a small island of normalcy in this sea of newness. She seemed tired, overwhelmed. I sat with her for a long time, just holding her hand, talking softly, reassuring her that I was there, that I wasn't leaving. Leaving that first night was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Walking out of her room, knowing she was in a strange place, without me there constantly, it tore at me. But I knew, logically, that this was necessary, that she would get the care she needed, the structure, the safety net that was fraying at home. Still, the guilt was a heavy cloak. Had I done the right thing? Was she okay? Would she be scared? These questions haunted my drive home to my own house, which now felt strangely empty after spending so much time at hers. The days and weeks that followed settled into a new routine. Visiting Mom, getting to know the staff, advocating for her needs, dealing with the ongoing logistics of closing down the old house completely. It was a constant juggle. And through it all, the family remained largely absent. Occasional texts asking for updates, sometimes calls, but no visits to the facility, no offers of help with the house. It was the same pattern, just in a new setting. I would update them on Mom's condition, her adjustment, the little victories and challenges. The responses were usually brief, sometimes critical, sometimes just nothing. It was clear they weren't happy about the move, even if they hadn't offered an alternative or any support to keep her at home. The resentment, or whatever it was, seemed to linger, a silent wall between us. I tried not to let it get to me, or rather, I tried to function despite it getting to me. There was too much to do, too much to manage. Mom's health was still fragile, requiring careful monitoring. There were appointments to schedule, medications to track, care plans to discuss with the facility staff. I was her primary contact, her voice, her advocate. I was the one they called if there was a change, if there was a problem. I was the one making the decisions, big and small, about her care. And with each decision, each interaction, I felt the weight of that responsibility, amplified by the lack of shared burden. It was a lonely place to be, navigating this complex path mostly on my own. There was a particular doctor's appointment coming up, a consultation with a specialist about one of Mom's ongoing conditions. I had scheduled it, coordinated with the facility, and informed the family. This time, a couple of them actually indicated they might attend. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me hoped maybe, just maybe, seeing Mom in this setting, hearing directly from a doctor, would bridge the gap, would help them understand the reality of her situation and the necessity of the care she was receiving. Another part of me dreaded it, anticipating the familiar tension, the unspoken judgment, the feeling of being on display, having my role questioned implicitly or explicitly. I braced myself for the encounter, hoping for the best but preparing for the worst, just like I had learned to do throughout this long, draining process. The appointment felt significant, like a potential turning point, for better or for worse. The appointment day arrived, heavy with expectation. I got to the facility early, helped Mom get ready. She was calmer than usual, maybe sensing the shift in routine. My brother Tom and my sister Sarah actually showed up. It was surprising, awkward mostly. They sat in the waiting area, looking around like they'd landed on another planet. When we were called back, they followed, quiet. The specialist was kind, thorough. He explained Mom's condition, the progression, the challenges of managing it. He talked about the care plan, why certain decisions had been made, the necessity of the facility's resources. He didn't pull any punches, but he wasn't clinical or cold about it. He spoke directly to Mom, even though she couldn't fully grasp everything, and then he addressed me, asking about her daily life, her comfort. And then he turned to Tom and Sarah. He asked if they had any questions, if anything he'd said was unclear. There was a long silence. Tom shifted in his chair. Sarah looked down at her hands. Finally, Tom cleared his throat. He asked something about medication side effects, a question I'd already asked and had answered weeks ago. I didn't interrupt. The doctor answered patiently. Sarah asked about visiting hours. Again, information readily available, information I'd sent out multiple times. The doctor answered that too, gently emphasizing the importance of family presence when possible. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation or the sudden enlightenment I had, in some wild corner of my mind, maybe hoped for. It was muted, understated. But hearing the doctor validate everything I'd been doing, everything I'd been saying in front of them, it felt significant. It wasn't me saying it anymore. It was a medical authority. After the appointment, Tom and Sarah left pretty quickly. They mumbled something about needing to get back to work. There were no apologies, no grand declarations of understanding or support. But something had shifted, subtly. The immediate aftermath wasn't a flood of offers to help, but the questions, the implicit doubts, seemed to quiet down. The calls became less frequent, and when they did happen, they were less about questioning Mom's care and more about just checking in on me. It was a small change. But after years of feeling like I was constantly defending my decisions, that silence was deafening, in the best possible way. Mom's condition continued its slow, steady progression. There were good days, less good days. But the crisis point, the acute stress of those early months and years, began to recede. We found a rhythm at the facility. I knew the staff, they knew me, they knew Mom. There was a sense of routine, of managed care. The weight on my shoulders didn't disappear, not entirely, because the responsibility was still mine. But it felt less crushing. I wasn't constantly fighting battles on multiple fronts anymore. I was just caring, being present. Looking back now, from this side of it, it's hard to capture the sheer exhaustion, the emotional isolation of those years. It changes you. You learn a resilience you never knew you had. You learn who you can count on, and sometimes, more painfully, who you can't. You learn to advocate fiercely, to speak up even when your voice shakes. You learn to find moments of grace and connection in the smallest things. A smile from your mom, a kind word from a nurse, a quiet afternoon holding her hand. The main conflict, I guess, wasn't really about Mom's care itself, not at its core. It was about family, about expectations, about communication, or the lack of it. It was about navigating the complex, often messy landscape of shared history and diverging paths when faced with a crisis that demanded unity. We never had a sit-down, come-to-Jesus meeting where everything was laid bare and resolved with hugs and understanding. Life isn't usually like that. Instead, there was a slow, gradual recalibration. My siblings found their own ways to be involved, or not involved, on their own terms. And I found a way to accept it, to stop expending energy on frustration and disappointment, and to focus that energy back on Mom and on myself. It's not a perfect ending. There are still moments of sadness, of regret, of wishing things had been different, wishing we could have faced this challenge truly together as a united front. But there's also peace, a peace that comes from knowing I did everything I could with the resources and support I had. A peace that comes from seeing Mom comfortable, cared for, in a place where she is safe and treated with dignity. And there's a different kind of relationship with my siblings now. It's not the close-knit bond I might have dreamed of, but there's an understanding, a quiet respect that wasn't there before. Maybe they saw the toll it took. Maybe they finally understood the magnitude of the responsibility I carried. Or maybe they just accepted that this was how it was going to be. We talk. We see each other at holidays. Sometimes we talk about Mom. It's not the same as sharing the load, but it's connection, and I'll take it. This journey, this long, winding road of caregiving, has been the hardest thing I've ever done. It stripped me bare, tested every limit, pushed me to the edge more times than I can count. But it also showed me my own strength. It showed me the depth of love I had for my mother, a love that could sustain me through the darkest days. It taught me patience, resilience, and the importance of self-care, even when it feels impossible. It made me reevaluate what truly matters in life. If you've been through anything like this, if you've been the primary caregiver, the one making the tough calls, the one shouldering the burden, you know what I'm talking about. The isolation, the exhaustion, the love, the unexpected moments of joy. It's a unique experience, a profound one. It changes the landscape of your life forever. What was the biggest lesson you learned on your caregiving journey? Let me know in the comments below. Mom is still at the facility. She's stable. She knows me most days. She smiles. That's enough. For now, that is absolutely enough. I visit her regularly. I advocate for her needs. I hold her hand. The future is uncertain, as it always is, but I face it with a quiet confidence I didn't have before. I survived this. We survived this. And we are okay. More than okay. We are still here. And that in itself is a victory.